So I was so confident that these concerts with like acts like Big Sean or, Tyga, big names would do well. And when they lost, I was so successful in high school, I didn't want to be known as a failure. So I lied about the losses. And once you tell one lie, you continue to
Mm-hmm.
tell more and more lies. And next thing you know, I was, over promising, under delivering, guaranteeing people their money back, doing crazy things to get people's money back, borrowing from shady figures, all of this. And before I knew it, I'm in all this debt and people are going to the police to complain about it.
Welcome to another episode of Time Served. We are hanging out in the studio today with a very special guest, Ian Bick. Welcome.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me,
Yeah.
guys. You guys have a very lovely studio and home.
Thank you. Thanks for flying across the country.
Yeah, of course, man. I'm glad we can make it happen.
Yeah, it's an honor. We've been watching your channel for a while now, and Raquel watches a lot of it. She watches videos all the time. She's been prepping for this interview.
I saw her leave comments on my YouTube. I responded to a couple of them.
She's studying. I think you're editing, and she's like, he's really good at asking questions, and she's trying to get me to get better at it. So
Oh, wow.
we'll see how I do under pressure.
That's funny.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I was born in Danbury, Connecticut. Well, I was born in Manhattan, actually, New York City, and I
Okay.
grew up in Danbury, Connecticut. Mom, dad, brother, good family, middle class. Went to private schooling for a little bit in elementary and a little bit of middle school because I was bullied a little bit in public school early on, primary and elementary. And that's the way we grew up, family vacations, movie nights, game nights. It was a pretty, normal lifestyle.
Upper middle class, middle class?
Yeah, I would say, about middle class. My dad owned his own business. He's a retired New York City public schools teacher turned caterer. And then my mom was a massage therapist, and then kind of like more of a stay-at-home mom. But she, it was a good, very good family dynamic. They taught us independence. My brother is 4 years younger than me. And it was all good until it wasn't good.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah.
So same situation, upper middle class for my family, and I just kind of wrong turn. So high school for me. What about for you? What happened in high school for you? Are you partying? Are you drinking? Are you experimenting with stuff? Or are you, a good kid still?
I think I was always like, genuinely a good kid. I did the musicals. I was never into sports. I was into musical theater. That's how I kind of gained popularity because I did the cast party where at the end of the year you would have all the upperclassmen and everyone at your house, and we lived on a lake and my parents would put like a big tent in the yard. And so I started like establishing relationships with the upperclassmen as a freshman. Kind of got a high from throwing that event and being liked and popular. So I started throwing house parties, at my parents' house, and that turned into 200, 300, 400 people house parties in our
Where were your
backyard.
parents?
They were upstairs. We would always like schmooze them over and bring them up food and wine and stuff. And
You had to be a pretty good salesperson to let your parents.
I was a great salesperson. I would say, Mom, there's only 30 people coming. I would give them a list of the names everyone knew. And then, all these kids would show up. There would be cars lined up down the road. It was a big party. Kids, skinny dipping at the lake, taking the boats out. We had a bonfire, beer pong. We had to set up a bar down at the patio that my parents didn't even know about. It was a really crazy time. And so that escalated into me doing a school dance, running for vice president of my class, and then ultimately starting to rent out a local nightclub when I turned 16, throwing big party promotion, like teen parties, we called them. And I was making like 10 grand a night in high school once a month, throwing like a Halloween rave, a Christmas rave, a paint party, things like that.
Did your parents know how much money you were making?
Yeah, I remember my dad came. He came to the club that first event I did to meet the owner to make sure the owner wasn't taking advantage of me or anything, and they hit it off, and we're still friends with that guy to this day. He comes over for Thanksgiving and stuff.
Wow.
And I remember that first night, we're sitting there counting all the cash at the end of the night. It was like 10 grand. That was just my share after all expenses were paid. Because it was simple math. You get 1,000 kids, 1,200 kids at anywhere from 10 to 15 bucks a pop.
Wow.
It was pretty good. And it kind of foreshadowed what I do now. I could pair the event business to podcasting because instead of actual bodies in the door, you want views. You want people to listen to it and watch it. So every person that watches it is a view. And in regards to the promotion, back then we would take flyers and you would go to the movie theater, or in high school we'd go to the top of the staircase and dump flyers, hundreds of flyers down the staircase, or leave it in lockers or put on cars.
So you just dump them down the staircase.
Exactly. Whereas now, I'm making clips to promote it, and that pulls the audience into the full episode. So it's the same thing.
Okay.
I always tell people I was a really good promoter, not a good business person. Never liked business. I don't like the art of business. I like promotion, marketing. That's why I don't really have interest to go into any other types of business. I like what I do,
Yeah.
I don't care about investing, or I was a little bit interested in real estate or even starting a new business and stuff. It's not what I do. I'm not that guy. I don't like that,
Yeah.
I like what I do, and
You're a
I like
sales guy.
creating. Yeah, sales and creating and doing that and making money from that. And I feel like if that ever ends, then I'm resourceful enough to pivot to something new,
Right.
But I like just doing one thing really well and focusing on that.
So going back to high school, did you kind of like almost overnight go from being, you said you were bullied a little bit. Did you go from being bullied to being popular? Like,
Yeah, I was never really bullied in high school. It was early on.
Okay.
So by the time I got to high school, I was, my popularity skyrocketed pretty quick, and I was probably one of the most well-known kids at Danbury High School, by the time I graduated. Even in Danbury to this day, I'll always see comments on videos like Danbury represent this and that. Because everything that would transpire years later became well-known. It's small town vibes.
and
So.
you still live in the same small town today?
Yeah, I live in Danbury. Cannot wait to move out of there. I'm debating either a big city or even down the road into Richfield, where my studio is.
Okay.
It's just Danbury showed, like, in the most recent years, not really any love, and just really negative small town vibes. So I don't really support it on that front. Like, when I tried to get a studio, over a year ago, none of the landlords got back to me, this and that. And I go out to eat in Richfield, the town over. My parents live kind of on the border, and I want to stay close to my parents and stuff. But Danbury is just, there's nothing there for me anymore.
Are you well known in town?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, everyone,
Okay.
Knows.
Watches the podcast?
No, I don't know, watches a podcast, but, the way the algorithms are on social media, it's going to push it out to your area, So I'm sure a ton of people see the clips and watch it, and it comes up on their For You page, especially the ones that go viral.
Yeah.
But everyone knows the story because the club was famous that I used to own.
Okay. I think I saw something on that. What was the name of the club?
Tuxedo Junction.
Tuxedo Junction.
Yeah, they're actually getting ready to tear it down soon. They're turning it into like a bank.
You don't want to go buy it?
Nah, the city had already bought it. They made sure that there was never going to be another nightclub there.
Okay.
But those days are long gone. I would never get back into that.
So you went from essentially promoting these parties at somebody else's club to getting your own club.
Yeah.
Okay. How did that happen? At 16.
Well, so I owned my first club at 18. In
Okay.
between there, I was doing like concerts at different colleges, and that's where I essentially how the case got started, because I raised a bunch of money from friends and family, overpromised, underdelivered, lied about the losses. So I was so confident that these concerts with like acts like Big Sean or Tyga, big names would do well. And when they lost, I was so successful in high school, I didn't want to be known as a failure. So I lied about the losses. And once you tell one lie, you continue to tell more and more lies. And next thing you know, I was, over-promising, under-delivering, guaranteeing people their money back, doing crazy things to get people's money back, borrowing from shady figures, all of this. And before I knew it, I'm in all this debt, and people are going to the police to complain about it. In between that time as well, I opened up my first club called Sky Bar, which was at the front room of Tuxedos, that I would eventually fold. And then when the case and the investigation started in 2015 or 2014, that's when I opened up Tuxedos, like the big room, and I actually ran and created like a successful electronic dance music venue with like Steve Aoki, the Chainsmokers, all that. That was while the investigation went, which was something like the news never really got right. They always thought it was the club was tied into the whole case,
Okay.
and it never was.
I haven't seen enough of the story yet. I should have done my research a little better. But I do. So I did see that it said it was a Ponzi scheme, essentially, that you got charged for. Was it just borrowing money to pay back people who you owed smaller amounts to? And
Yeah, basically the way I looked at it was I was barely 18. I didn't have any credit.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, like instead you could borrow from one credit card to pay off another credit card or a mortgage or whatever. I can borrow loans from people to pay off other loans and simultaneously invest that money into concerts and this and that. And we did other things with the money too, like buy clothes, took a couple trips or jet skis or whatever. And that's what we thought kind of like was our salary. But only a fraction of the money we took in actually went to that. We did
Right.
invest majority of it, but the problem was that we were using some people's money to pay off other money, but I looked at it all as loans. It was very poor financial management, and I think you've owned a business before. The one thing you need in a business is cash flow, like a
Yeah.
legitimate revenue source. Our only revenue source, because the concerts are 6, 7 months down the line, is just loans from people. So
Right.
on paper, it looks bad. In my mind, and then our mindset at the time was not to defraud anyone or steal anyone's money. It was just we need to float the business until everything works out. And it had all the concerts worked out, then we wouldn't be here today. It would have been success. Everyone gets paid back. Thing in business is, and you know how it is, vendors and stuff, there's no issues if everyone's getting paid.
Right.
As long as everyone's making some money and they see the checks coming in, well, what are they going to complain about? What are they
Yeah.
going to do? And so no cash flow. You could pair that to now, and I see legitimate cash flow coming in, and that's something I never had before.
Right.
So it is nice to see a legit. Sometimes I'm in disbelief that it's like legitimate money.
People always, I always tell that to people. There's a big difference between cash and cash flow. Cash flow is so much more important than cash, right? I'd rather have 15,000 every month guaranteed than a million sitting in the bank, because as soon as you get a million sitting in the bank and you have no cash flow, you start spending, and then that's when you get into all kinds of trouble, and spending happens pretty fast. What kind of lifestyle were you living at 18, and what kind of money were you spending in general, just as a kid?
I mean, this was a very, very short period of time. Like this
Okay.
whole thing this was in 2013. It was like the summer of 2013. I'm 18 years old. And I was never really into clothes. Like I'm still not really like I'll buy nicer clothes now. Only because I have to with the podcast and going to events and stuff, but it's like Abercrombie. So it's
Yeah.
not even really that, it's not like design. I'll never wear designer clothes
Yeah.
again. I'm not into that. I did that once, bought the $5,000 outfit, because my friends kind of were like, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that. It wasn't for me.
Yeah.
You will never catch me in one of these unless it's gifted from like a brand or something.
Yeah.
But I'm not buying, I'm not doing that, I like Abercrombie now, so I'll shop there. But I was a kid that always wore like a pair of cargo shorts and a black t-shirt, and we spent the money on some dinners. I was always a kid that took my friends out for dinner because, everyone didn't have money or this and that, and because they were all going to college or still in high school. I was always the DD in high school where, because I wasn't a big drinker, I would drive everyone and we'd get Wendy's. And I also had a job. I always had a job working for my dad or at a corporate center or whatever. So I would pay for everyone's food. It's like a couple $100,
Yeah.
I mean, even now, you go out to dinner, you get the bill. It's really not, if you're making money, it's not that big of a deal. I never really looked at it that way. And me and my mom differ on that a lot, So yeah, I mean, it wasn't, and we did a couple stupid purchases. Like we bought a pair of jet skis, which was really like the
Yeah.
government's biggest issue with the whole thing. When you look at the news articles saying I lived a lavish lifestyle, all it was jet skis. I didn't buy a house. The
Yeah.
car I had bought with my own money, and then I lost that right
What
away.
kind of car was it?
It was a Mustang convertible,
Okay.
brand new, and then I traded it in for a used Camaro. I didn't like have kids and put them through private school. I wasn't doing anything. We took a couple trips, to Florida and to Key West and California, but that was it. And that was with some of the people that had invested money.
I think the media likes to make the story sound a little bit bigger for,
Oh, they
attention.
blew it out. The feds never should have took that case, ever. It was so small. I think they thought it was bigger than what it was, and I think they also thought that I would take a plea deal.
And so eventually they arrested you and they charged you with
15 federal counts, wire fraud, money laundering, making a false statement to the FBI, because I met with them without a lawyer because I was just trying to explain everything.
Yeah.
I put their whole case together. I brought them the paperwork, the documents. Had I lawyered up on day one, I think they would have had a hard time
Yeah.
building the case. But I gave so much testimony and documents to help them.
And so the actual charges though stemmed essentially from just borrowing money, not paying it back, and just poor money management.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like there was no case if no one complained. You need someone to complain. It always starts with a complaint.
Hmm.
You know, it doesn't just come out of nowhere.
Right.
Someone's got to complain, and that complaint stems from someone losing money. You know, that's why like I look at some of these like big sexual harassment cases, anything in general that's happening now in the
Yeah.
world,
Diddy.
just pay the money.
Yeah.
All he had to do was pay, you know,
Whatever Cassie was asking for. Because I
yeah,
think that's where that one stemmed from, was his wife.
100%.
Yeah.
Because this went on for years.
Yeah.
All you had to do was pay the money. Jeffrey Epstein, you
Yeah.
just pay the money. And I'm not saying what they did was right. Like, they're bad people
Right.
for doing what they did. But if you didn't want to get it out from a business perspective, like if Diddy's worth $1 billion, you're telling me you're not going to give up 500 million to avoid 30, 40 years in prison?
Yeah, well,
or
he'll
whatever
never
it
get out.
is.
That's life. For
Yeah,
him,
or
a lot
whatever
of
it is.
these
You're
guys,
gonna you lose the rest of your life because you want to hold on to that money for whatever reason because you
Right.
think you're above that. Just pay the money.
Yeah.
You know, that's all it is.
I think a lot of times people get egos, and their ego gets in the way of making rational decisions, and they decide that they can beat it because they probably beat just like John Gotti. John Gotti beat everything until he didn't, until the IRS got him or whatever the case was.
Well, he was in their face.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
You can't be in their
newspaper.
face.
Right?
Mm.
You lay low and try to stay out of the way the best you can.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you this: growing up, middle class, did you ever? Obviously, you never considered that you would be in prison yourself. Did you know people who had been to prison? Had you ever even been around anything close to that lifestyle?
I never even thought of it really. No.
Yeah.
I never had. I mean, I know some people have family went to prison and stuff. That never affected me. I was never.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever had family that was arrested. I think we had an uncle that got arrested for like indecent exposure. Accidentally had his shirt off in a public park, and that was like the biggest news of our family. And he spent the night in jail. But other than that, no, I was never. You would read about stuff in the paper, but it never affected our family at all.
So when you had cuffs put on your wrist for the very first time, that's got to be a pretty shocking, experience, right? As a kid, especially, and then thinking, "Am I going to jail?" Or what are your thoughts when this is happening, when you're actually getting arrested?
Yeah, I mean, the first couple times I got arrested were for like misdemeanor charges, really in the club with alcohol. Like the city
Okay.
was trying to like put pressure on me. I got one for driving without a valid license, stuff like that. But like when the actual feds came and stuff, I never really thought I was going to prison. I didn't think I was going to prison until I was actually in prison. I was just in denial the whole time, and I thought I was above that. And I was like, "There's no way they're sending a young white 21-year-old kid comes from a good family to prison." I was just so confident in that. I mean, I was wrong, but that was just my mentality because you grow up thinking that you're not the type of person that's going to go to prison.
What did your parents, how did they react to this? Were they coming to visit you while you're like in holding, or?
Yeah, they came to visit me. I mean, it was at a detention center in Rhode Island, so it was like through the glass, like you see in the movies and in TV. It was definitely a very heartbreaking experience, especially for my mom. She cried at sentencing and stuff. It's tough. My dad flew all the way out to Wisconsin to see me at Oxford when I was at the prison camp out there. It was a hard time for everyone. My brother was young. It was at the time where people were ripping me on Facebook and, social media and stuff. So he would have to fend them off and everything like that.
People in your town that were like upset about money
small
and stuff
town
like that?
vibes. Yeah, people that would. Well, listen, like when you get an article written about you in a negative way, everyone comes out of the woodwork. Oh, I knew all along. Or like people you thought were your good friends, like they just bash you, That's why I'll never repost an article talking smack about someone because I've been there in that spot, It just people live off of that, Like we used to be friends and you're ripping me apart. I think that was definitely really hard to see.
Have they gotten over it to any extent at all, or is it still a lot of animosity in your small town?
I don't really talk to anyone from the past. I mean, what are they going to say? Like I'm paying the restitution monthly, and like I've always been a good person, and I'm like, I don't know what else they want. Like I've taken the worst thing that could have ever happened to me and turned it into the best thing that could have ever happened to me. If anything, if someone has something negative to say, it's out of jealousy now. And the ironic part is everyone wanted me to go to prison from that area, and I go to prison, and now I have this. So honestly, I think the worst punishment would have been, hey, go work a normal job, and then you get no prison story, nothing like that, So I think in hindsight, if they knew what they knew now, they wouldn't have sent me to prison.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a unique perspective, a unique way to look at it. So.
Yeah.
Prison helps a lot of people. It helped me as well. I think a lot of the other people like in the YouTube space can probably have a similar story to that. So. Let's talk about prison itself. you said you didn't think you were going to prison until you got there, and you get to federal prison. You're starting on. Do you guys have like, is it 2, 3, 4 yards type situations or minimum?
There's minimum for the camp, low, medium, max, and then there's like the super maxes or high security holdings and stuff. I thought I was going to a camp.
Okay.
That didn't happen. My points were high because it goes by the point system. You need 11 or under to go to the camp. And they sent me to a low because I had 12. They said I didn't graduate high school. They didn't have the diploma, and I did graduate high school. And then because of my age, if you're under 25, they jack your points up. So I went to a low, and, I had a hard time there. Everyone thought I was a chomo.
Really?
A sex offender, yeah, because when you're young and white in prison and in the feds for fraud, and you say you're there for fraud, all the old guys are there for fraud, like if there's any fraud people. So apparently chomos lie and say they're there for fraud. That's like their cover story.
They don't get automatically moved to
No, at the lows they're allowed to walk the yard.
Whoa.
Yeah, and the feds at the lows, it's Chomo City. I was at one of the largest sex offender compounds in the United States, Fort Dix. It looked like a college campus. It was huge.
That's insane. Yeah, in the state you would never see that. They're not allowed anywhere near the yards because they check paperwork in the state. They don't do that in the feds.
They do. Well, that's why all the comments are funny. Like, oh, sex offenders won't walk the yard. Well, they got to go somewhere, And
Yeah.
at low, they're not allowed at camps, but they're allowed in lows and in some mediums. But yeah, they check paperwork. I didn't know what paperwork was. I went in there with no aspect of any type of politics,
Yeah.
nothing. I went in there blind. I'm like, paperwork? Let me ask one of the guards, when they asked me for it. So I had a lot of problems until I actually got my paperwork and I didn't run with anyone because no one normally, like, you get off the bus, I would see like the Mexicans I was with or the blacks or different races, their own people would come up to them right away with a bag of like shower shoes and everything. And I'm there, no one's coming up to me because no one wants to be the white guy that are the good white guys. They don't want to risk going up to a bad white one, hooking them up to find out. They don't want that.
Right.
I didn't know that at the time, so I'm the only one at each prison I go to not getting taken care of. I remember taking a shower with my jumpsuit on the ground because I didn't want to put my bare feet on it. On the floor,
Oh, because they weren't bringing you shower shoes.
Yeah, when you get to a new
anything.
spot, you don't have your property or anything.
Yeah.
And honestly, the prisons really should at least give a pair of flip-flops or something.
The state does. I'm surprised the feds.
Yeah, they don't have a communal pair or anything. They don't do that at all. It's wild. Or a mat you could bring in, a rubber mat, something.
Yeah, you can't go in the showers barefoot. That's a big no-no.
Yeah, exactly. So it was definitely very hard for me in that sense because no one teaches you about that. That's why I think like the prison channels and stuff are so insightful because you can know what to expect. And obviously there's some that are a little ridiculous, like there was no like fighting the biggest, guy on the yard. All the best advice is, just like don't gamble or, don't trust anyone off the bat and don't come off as like a bitch or a punk or anything like that, like stand your ground, but you don't have to go right up to someone. Like I love there's people that'll come and tell me these stories on the podcast of how, I picked out, the biggest, blackest guy and just swung.
Have you seen the skit where they do that?
No, I haven't seen that.
It's a big black dude, and he goes, they always tell you when you get to prison to go pick the biggest guy you see on the yard. And it happens to be him. And he goes, I'm asking all the new inmates to stop beating me up on your first day here. And he's like 6'5". He's huge. He's like, I just want to knit in peace. And he's knitting a sweater.
That's
I'll
funny.
send it to you. It's a pretty good one.
But yeah, it's funny in that sense. It's really funny. So
yeah, it's not like people see in movies and TV shows. And like you said, a big part of it's just staying out of debt. Don't gamble. Don't get in debt. Don't mind your business. Stand your ground if you have to. And for the most part, you're okay. But if people think that you're a chomo or something like that, that's a whole different kind of situation because now you're not part of a car. People are looking at you weird. And how long did it take for you to get your paperwork? Did you have to like?
Took a few weeks, yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, they also have cell phones. Like there's contraband phones and stuff. They could have
Yeah.
just looked it up. But it's just people are crazy. There was no need for it. And I looked really young. I was younger than I look now. I got the baby face. So imagine me. I was 8 years ago. I was 21 when I first got in there. I had the Chomo glasses. I mean, I still kind of have Chomo glasses, but they're even more round. And they were the real Chomos, the Chomo 3000s.
The Chomo
man.
3000s. That's
Yeah.
what they called them. I remember that.
The Chomo 3000s, man. It's pretty crazy, It's it was nuts, Guys try to extort me.
Were you ever afraid?
I don't know about afraid. I mean, there was like adrenaline, heart pounding moments, but I wasn't like I'm afraid to stay here. I was just always strategic because you can kind of get a lot of these guys are so full of shit. Like they're not
Mm.
actually going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Like they're going to test your limits, and they want to come off like that. And we're at a low security prison. No one wants to leave the spot. So, and anyone that does try to act like that, the other inmates will kind of get rid of because they don't want heat to the unit.
Yeah.
I think no one's going to go stabbing people up and stuff because it's just going to bring heat to the unit. Everyone's got cell phones. Everyone's got everything,
Yeah.
So they kind of, there's a line you walk. And once, someone kind of plays their hand and you know what their limit is, then you kind of can navigate the situation and play your hands and move around.
Yeah, that's a good breakdown. I think I've always compared prison to like a city, right? It's all about economics, and there's little businesses and they're operating, and if you bring heat, all of those little businesses get shut down.
Yeah.
And then if you're the one who brings the heat, who do you think those little businesses are going to be mad at? So a lot of the times people just kind of try to stay out of trouble so they can keep business running as normal, running as usual. Is it pretty much the same thing in the feds, or?
Yeah, I would say that. They'll get the guys that are bringing heat to the compound. They'll get rid of. They'll throw a phone in their boot, or they'll do something.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they'll get rid of them. So
Yeah.
they'll do what they got to do.
What happens if you get caught with a phone in the feds, or back then at least?
You'll go to the shoe.
Okay.
If your points are low enough, you'll go get put out. But I think most of the time they always just ship you. I think at least now you'll do like 60 days in the hole or whatever, 60, 90 days. In some cases, they'll send the phone out to the FBI for prosecution. But I think if it's like you're in a small town, the FBI will pick it up and charge you, and you get like another 5 years up to.
Yeah.
Which kind of sucks if you're in one of those states that do that, where they literally have no cases and they're just picking those up. But like you'd never see it in New Jersey or New York. They weren't charging
They're too
people.
busy.
Yeah, unless they were used to commit a crime.
Right.
So it's very one-sided in that regard.
That's pretty similar.
But they'll open up the phone. They'll go through it. I think if they see you like calling hits or doing something illegal, they'll charge you. But otherwise, if you're just caught with it, FaceTiming your wife or something,
People think that when you delete the text messages, they're gone.
Oh yeah, and that they can't get in those phones.
Yeah.
Because they were just Boost Mobile phones. No one had iPhones.
Yeah.
Because you had to always take the battery pack out separately.
Mm-hmm.
So it was totally different.
Yeah. It was pretty similar in the state as well. I always stayed pretty far away from the phones because they would do the same thing here in Arizona. If you got caught, you'd get another 2, 3, 4 years added to your sentence, and that's a long time. And so, what was your actual sentence when you were charged and convicted?
So it was 3 years,
Okay.
and then 1 year home confinement.
Okay.
My PSI was 8 to 12, or 10 to 12 was the guidelines.
Presumptive sentencing?
Yeah, like pre-sentence investigation
pre-sentencing,
report. Okay. And then the prosecution said a downward departure because of my age, so they wanted 6 to 8. We wanted 0, so the judge went for 3 and then a year of house arrest.
Okay. And how did it go by as far as, time? Was it pretty quick, or was it like a long, drawn out, miserable experience?
First couple of months, I would say, are the longest.
Okay.
And that's when like you're going through the appeal process, you're waiting to get bond. I mean, I always had something to keep looking forward to. Like when I first got in, I got my bond revoked. So, okay, sentencing, looking forward to sentencing. Maybe I'll get out. Sentencing happens. We're putting in another appeal to get a bond pending appeal. That gets denied. Then you get an appeal for that. So I always had something to look forward to, and then, to count the days. And then once I exhausted all appeals, like a year in, you're already a year in with good time and everything. You got another, year to go. But like once you get through those first few months, I think those were the slowest, dreadliest months, and around the holidays and stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely, I would say the fastest, like 2018 flew by. That was my last year. 2017 was slow. But I think what helped me with my time was that I moved around a lot. Moved to all these different prisons. Got caught on a cell phone at one prison, went to another one, and I dated the guard's cousin years before. So he reported that he went to my house for barbecues and stuff, so they put me in the shoe for that.
Wow.
They called me McLovin in there because I look like McLovin and Squints from The Sandlot. And then I moved to another one, I went on Con Air, ended up in Wisconsin for my last year of it. And it was just... a lot of moving around, a lot of moving pieces. I had my most fun at the camp. Guys were leaving, running through the woods, bringing back food. pizza.
So there's no gates essentially.
No fence.
They can
Yeah.
just walk off.
Yeah, there's a camp driver that's an inmate that like runs to the post office, brings inmates to the
Where's the
airport, the
camp
bus
at?
station.
Wisconsin?
This one was in Wisconsin. They're all over the country. I read an article earlier. They're closing this one down. Inmates, there's a medium next door, so inmates would, you know, run the grounds. There's trucks. There's lawnmowers. There's everything. They would upkeep the grounds. There's a tennis ball courts. There's a volleyball court. That's why they call it Club Fed.
Okay, so is that Club Fed? Is that
That's
what
Club
that is?
Fed, yeah. The most I'd say the cushiest one is Otisville in New York. That's where like a lot of the Jewish guys go.
Okay.
That's like the celebrity one.
How do you get there? Is it like you guys got to know people who know people, or
For which one?
for Otisville or any
Otisville,
of like
yeah, it's more you got to know people. But at camps in general, if your points are under 11, you can go to a camp. Obviously, there's crappy camps, but they're all pretty much the same. These are low security offenders, non-violent, no sex offenders. And you're just doing your time. It was a 4-man dorm. There was a dog program there, so there was dogs that lived in some of the wings. It was a really interesting situation.
It just sounds so different to me that it's hard to like.
It's a crazy environment.
Yeah,
it
wrap
really
my mind
is.
around it. I'm
It's
used to like
so
state
crazy.
prisons, and they're horrible.
Yeah, there's nothing like that
places.
in the state.
No, they're horrible. They're dirty, and everybody, they're miserable. But
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think the ultimate punishment in being in prison is being taken away from your family. A lot of people in the comments, you'll see them, you shouldn't have access to this, or you shouldn't have a TV, or you shouldn't be able to do this, you should be doing hard labor, breaking rocks. And it's, the punishment is being taken away from your family. And the ultimate thing is, did you learn from it? What was, for you, what was the number one thing you learned having to go to prison as somebody who never expected to be there?
I think I definitely learned a lot about patience. I think before, and even in the months after, I was always like, go, go, go. I need this now, now, now. Now it's just patience, because that gives you time. And if I made it 3 years without this or 3 years without that, or it took 3 years to get that, that's what it kind of teaches you. And also it teaches you like time kind of heals a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it was just like a big part of my life, and it set me up for everything in the future. I didn't know that I was on the path of where all those stories I experienced in prison would, give me what I have now. And it took me years after. A lot of guys get out of prison, get into content. I worked a job for 4 years. I was at Whole Foods 3-4 years. Very humbling experience, working a job, paying my bills,
Mm-hmm.
being self-sufficient for the first time, having everything in my name, getting an apartment, doing all of these things. And I always tell people that when I speak into prisons and stuff, don't go out jumping into a business or content right away. Unless you have something that you're really passionate about and you know what to do, establish yourself. Like, I think it would have been way harder.
Into the prisons, like people wanting to get out and get into content, is that like a thing?
Well, I think they're inspired by
Okay.
our stories and, making money from it and stuff. They're definitely inspired. I get guys all the time that DM me, hey, what do I do? A lot of my guests are trying to build YouTube channels and stuff. I think it's just, and that goes back to the patience aspect,
Mm-hmm.
I got out and was like, I want to go back into clubs and this and that. And I'm glad I didn't, because it wouldn't have worked out. And then COVID would have happened and shut that all down.
So you considered doing it when you got out, going back into
Nightclubs.
promotions?
Yeah, but never content. I didn't know anything about this. And then, this all changed because of COVID. COVID exploded the world of like prison content and making videos, like the OG creators that were the original prison YouTube creators. Kind of carved the way. And I think that what ended up opening the realm for guys like you or me is those original creators got lazy. They, sat back and got idle, and they didn't adapt to the times.
Yeah.
So like they were just YouTubers, but then TikTok comes around. Then all these things, they want you to post shorts. They want you to start podcasts. You got to keep your foot on the gas. So when they first started, they were very new in their field, and there was only 5 or 10 of them, and they're bringing in all this money. And now they've kind of fizzled out because they can't keep up with the times, and you have to continue to put that work in,
Yeah.
That's why guys like JD Delay, they keep their foot on the pedal at all
he
times.
doesn't stop. That guy drops. I had my notifications on his channel for a while. I had to turn them off because I was getting so many. He was dropping like 4 videos a day.
Yeah, and his numbers, show for it. He's making great money. He's growing on every platform because he's just relentless. Like me, I'm relentless. Like I'm always posting. I haven't taken a day. You don't feed into the drama. You don't try to do other things. You stay in your field, And there's ways to differ. Like I get those original creators probably got burnt out sharing their story. I would too, because they built their channels just like I built my initial platform, sharing my story. but you can't do that forever. JD saw that. I saw that, you can't sit there and share your story. That would be like if you and your wife are talking about how you guys met
100 times.
yeah, 100 times,
Yeah.
you can't do it. I
Right.
got burnt out telling my prison stories after a couple months. So you have to pivot. And the way I pivoted was starting the podcast and doing interviews. So I think that's what also helped change things too. You have to find your lane. And
Yeah.
like what you're doing now, I think is so cool. Like those videos, that's very unique. And you were like, I don't think anyone else is doing that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool aspect that you should run with, and you find ways to improve it and make it better. And it's really cool. And
Yeah,
I
that's
found
kind of
my
the plan.
lane. Yeah. And JD's going into more like pop culture, like doing reviews. And he's just a big personality.
Yeah.
So you have to adapt and still keep your foot on the gas. And I think that's what's carving the new way. But there's so many guys that do get out, and guys that come on my platform, they're starting to just make content about their story, or they're trying to figure out how, and that's great. Do that in the initial, but figure out how you're going to pivot, because you'll get that initial base following from your story, but what happens next?
Right.
Because I wouldn't be where I'm at today if sitting here with you doing the things I'm doing now if I just focused on my story, because it wouldn't be the same effect.
Do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy getting to hear other people's stories?
Oh, I prefer it because I don't really have to do much now. Like I love a good episode that I can just sit back and the guest does the talking.
Right.
Like I set the guest up, But it's also hard too because you have to stay focused. You got to ask good questions. Then you piece it together and stuff, which is why, like I was saying, like I gotta, I'm tuning back on the travel. I'm prioritizing me just being my own routine, taking care of myself, doing what I want to do, and still doing the interviews and everything, because they're powerful stories. And I know I got to continue to do the 5 episodes, and to do that efficiently and the way it needs to be done, I got to stay home. And
we'll come to you next time.
No, it's all good. But like this is the last leg of my little tour. I've been on the road for like a month now, and it's cool to be able to travel, but sometimes like the quality isn't the best, in the sense where like if we rent an Airbnb, there could be a little echo in the room, or the guest will move around in their chair, or it's not like exactly perfect the way I want it to be, but it's good. It's good quality because the gear is good, but it's not 100%. And you're only as good as your last podcast, And as the show continues to grow, so many new listeners are picking up on it. I don't want them to be like, oh, this is a crappy podcast because this audio was a little messed up because we were at an Airbnb and that's not the normal podcast.
It's a lot harder than people think, right?
It's a lot, man. It's a lot to
so
produce a show, especially by yourself, like you're doing everything. But I think that's integral to my story, as I pursue trying to get my story out, my personal story, getting a book or a movie or whatever happens. I think what makes it interesting too is that I'm grinding it on my own. I built this. I built every follower on my own. I do all that on my own.
Do you enjoy it?
It's fun. Like it's the cool thing about what I do is there's no limit. There's no limit on how much money you can make. Like it's infinite. And I think it's cool. Sometimes I'm even in disbelief. Like when you look at these creators that get these massive deals, or actors or whatever, but more so influencers that get paid so much money to do whatever, or just the cool perks that come with it, or this and that, it's cool. Like I'll go into restaurants, people recognize me, and I'll get like free dessert, or free something, or getting recognized is really cool. And you also have to make sure the experience is good for everyone all the time. Like you always have to be willing to take a picture or say hi and be friendly, because it's that one person that you give the wrong impression to. You don't want to leave them.
Says something bad on the internet.
Yeah, you don't want to leave them with that memory. So I always just try to be really nice to people, and just like you do what you got to do, and grind.
Well, you're doing a good job at it, man. Like you're crushing it. As far as like the interview space goes, I think you and Matt Cox have it like on lock. And when we do try to do, I think we've done maybe 4 or 5 interviews, and we built this studio so my wife and I the 2 of us could talk. But when we do try to do interviews, we go to your guys' channel. We study how you guys do it. You guys have gotten it down really good. You got some good stories on your guys' channels, and it's pretty impressive. So it's inspiring for us smaller guys to try to get there. I think eventually we're gonna pivot more outside of the studio. We like filming out, picking people up and stuff like that. But
yeah, you find your niche.
Yeah,
and that's what the video you saw on me, and the numbers don't lie. You had 60,000 views on that.
Yeah,
you run with it.
Yeah.
You double down, you figure out how to make it better.
Yep.
And the stuff you were telling me in the car about what you have in the pipeline, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's all about personalities. Like what the biggest thing, which I think has propelled my TikTok growth more so than others, is that there's always a new face in every clip. It's always different, and the quality's so good. So you're always seeing someone different on there telling a different story. And it's really cool to see that out there. The clips are everything, at least for my thing. I think I've really mastered the growth on every platform, and it's growing consistently.
So do you see yourself still doing the same thing in 5 years from now?
Yeah, everyone's like, I'll get people that are like, hey, you're a really good interviewer. Will you ever pivot like to other content? There's plenty of other podcasts that do the other content, and my niche will never die out because I have pivoted in the sense where I do law enforcement. I do addiction stories. I do victims. I do psychologists, and that's what differs me from like Johnny Mitchell, who will just do like like those really in depth like drug dealing or mafia or like really big crime stories, and then Matt, who sticks to a lot of like the crime stories too.
Yeah.
I'll go far reaching, like I'll have a victim on, or I'll have just an addict that never went to prison, just an addict. Tell me about the addiction stuff. Every episode's different, which is what I like. And, not every episode's about prison and it's the guts and the glory. And I think that's what made my content appealable to a larger audience. Yeah. And I think I've really grown on Spotify and Apple compared to those other prison genre podcasts because of that ability. It's more society and culture. It's more talking about feelings, therapy, that type of thing,
And it relates, you can get one of those topics into almost every household for the most part, right? Like
exactly.
Prison doesn't necessarily reach into every household in the United States, maybe.
And I think the biggest thing is that mine's redemption, which differs from the other ones too, because at the end of every episode, what do you learn? Where did you come from this? And what's a success story? That's kind of like how I pitch it as. It's a little bit different. And are the views as good as some other channels on every episode? No, but it's putting out good work. And I'm not going to tell someone no that wants to come on the channel. Everyone's welcome on my channel. It just has to relate somewhat to criminal justice.
Yeah.
Like I've got, and I have military members too. Like, but there'll be some that are just like, it's nothing. Like there's no angle. I promise people, if I could find an angle, you could come on the show. I'll run with it,
Yeah.
And I'll guide you and I'll help you do it because that's what it's for. It's for those people where the other channels are so picky on who they want to have on. They tell people no, we wouldn't be here without the guests. And that's why I'll never run out of content.
Yeah.
That's why so many people reach out, and I have these endless amounts. And you also don't know who's going to be the banger episode. Perfect example. I had this girl that I did in Kentucky when I was there. 50-minute episode. She was very shy. Not necessarily my best episode, but interesting. The people loved her. It's at 50,000 views in a week on YouTube. Wow. And I put that on Thanksgiving Day, which is historically not a good day to put out content,
Okay.
So you just never know. And that's a girl that one of these other channels never would have even had on, So it's just about having that information. I do a lot of law enforcement. I do cops. Who don't have crazy crime stories, but it's just interesting to hear from.
You got to learn a lot. Being the host yourself, you get to talk to cops or detectives or, like you said, psychologists. You have to learn a ton of information from these people, getting to hear their stories, right? Like,
yeah, it's definitely a lot to absorb, but that's why it's so important to be focused and not head running into a bunch of directions. And that's why I got to get strict next year about one interview a day. Like when I'm at Spotify, like this past week, I'm doing 3 a day. Like I'm shot, and you're barely getting any sleep.
Wow.
And it's just like you're exhausted, Like last night I went to an event for Spotify, didn't get back till 1, up at 6 for the play-in, and doing the interviews back to back is terrible, and granted you have to do in certain situations, but it's just a lot on the brain.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's stimulating and it's exhausting.
So your goal next year is to cut back to 1 a day.
Just to film. I'm still put out 5 a week, but filming wise.
5 a week.
So I always keep like about 50 in the tank. Like I have 50 episodes about recorded right now.
Holy cow.
Just sitting on my hard drives. Like I'm very prepared, and like I could take like a month off if I wanted to. I'd still have to put up my episodes to edit. But it's a pretty good sailing machine,
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. You've turned it into a machine, and you've got it.
I've turned it into a machine, and I'm just hustling, you know.
For us, it was kind of like a hobby. We were just kind of experimenting and playing around in the beginning with it, and then it started to work a little bit, and then we started to have fun with it. And now we're kind of trying to figure out where do we go from here. Do we keep having fun with it? And So I'll be reaching out for advice.
Yeah, whatever you guys need, man. Seriously, you have my number. Like, I shot
Yeah.
you a couple of recommendations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what it's all about, having the community. I'm very responsive, you know, especially to people that have come on my show. If they ever need help connecting to guests, this and that, you know, I'm always going to be there for those. And I think that differs me from a lot of people too. Because when I was starting out, there were so many people that weren't helpful, or you can't get any answers, you know?
Yeah.
Or I hate these influencers that charge for these mastermind classes.
Yeah.
And I almost did that, like the book a call or this or a charge. I'll never do that,
Yeah.
you know? Charging for a class. The knowledge is free, you know?
Yeah, you can get mostly everything on YouTube these days.
Exactly, or just watching other
Yeah.
people, you know?
Yeah.
Don't charge for that. Put the other people on. What, you're going to be stingy? And like,
Yeah.
I hate seeing these business classes, that people are paying this money for, you
Yeah.
know? Dating stuff or anything. It's just all, it's crazy.
Sales courses.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that, you know? I wouldn't do that to people. If someone asked me for something, you know, granted time, like I try to get back to as many people as possible. It's just like my phone blows up nonstop all the time, especially when you're running your own social media, but I do the best I can.
And you pretty much operate like a very lean team. It's just you and an editor, it sounds like.
No, I edit everything myself.
Oh, so it's just you.
It's just me. My brother helps book guests and stuff. We both kind of go through it. I think, you know, probably next year I'll get like an assistant or something that'll help me. I think I'll always do the editing and the clips and the posting, because that's what makes it special.
So you're shooting 3 a day and then you're editing at night?
Well, so my editing schedule is I can edit all 5 at once, like on a Sunday for the following week. You know, so I'll do it on the Sunday, and then, you know.
It takes us like 2 to 3 days to edit like the most simplest of videos because we're so bad at it.
Yeah, you learn that. That's where I was,
Yeah.
you know. It took me a while, and you make mistakes.
Yeah.
Then you learn and get good, you know. And I just do 2 camera angles, you know, and that's it. I don't do a wide shot, and it makes it easy. And I make my clips, and I call it a day, and I post it, and I do the titles. ChatGPT is a big tool for titling and stuff, and I pay for thumbnails. I don't have the patience to do graphic design. I'm not good at it. Don't want to learn. I'd rather, you know, give up $500 a month for the thumbnails to have it done the right way than me twiddling my thumbs.
Yeah.
Dealing with that, you know, is what I've learned.
Where do you see yourself as far as going into, because I know you were just telling me you were in Arkansas visiting a prison. Where do you see yourself as far as like going into the prisons and doing more work like that?
I'd love to. Like, whoever invites me, I always go. I donate my time. I'll pay for the flight to go out there, you know. I think when we're working on a book deal, when that comes out, that'll open up a lot of doors for public speaking and stuff. I'm not in the next, I mean, I never really get invited to places in Connecticut and stuff. I'd love to try to get into my local high school to speak at. One of the kids, I do this mentoring thing with juveniles that were in the system, where they connected me with one of their guidance counselors. I think it would be a really cool full circle moment to speak at the high school. But yeah, I mean, you know, I love going into these prisons and speaking and sharing my story, and it's funny and it's entertaining and it's a good time, and that's kind of like my way of giving back too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you always have 2 types of ex-offenders. You've got the type that say they would never go back into prison under any circumstances whatsoever, and you've got the guys like you and I. Like, I love going. I've been to prison this year, I think 3 or 4 times. I went to a woman's prison in Texas, a men's prison in Globe, and then a men's prison in Kingman. I think that's it. And like, I love going back into prison. So it's like, prisons here in Arizona, even like, well, not the same ones I was locked up at, but very similar structure in the state prisons, and it's awesome. Like, it's a cool feeling to be able to go in there and not be, you know, in trouble, but to be helping people, trying to, you know, do something positive.
I think it's great.
Yeah, there's an event next month. I'll shoot you the details if you want to go. It's in Utah, but I think I'm going to go up there.
I'm probably not going to go to that, but
it's all right.
I'll take it some time off from travel. But
okay. Yeah. So I guess I'll wrap it up. Ian, thank you for joining us, man. I appreciate it. I'm going to practice my interview skills, so when I come out to Connecticut, maybe we'll give this another shot.
You did great, man. It was a good
it.
conversation, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and you're always welcome. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Awesome.